Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear viewers, Pakistan inherited 20% of the subcontinent's population at the time of partition. However, her share in industry was less than 7% and mostly consisting of small scale industrial units. No creditable large industry existed in Pakistan at the time of its creation. In 1947, Pakistan did not have a single ordnance factory, and the remark can almost be stretched to include major installations of every sort. The East Wing produced 70% of the world's jute, but there was not a single jute mill, and West Bengal was almost the sole buyer. Similarly, in the West Wing, only 16,000 of the total 1.5 million cotton bales produced could be processed domestically. The new state did not even have its own bank and depended on the Reserve Bank of India. Industrializing the country was a challenge that founding economic managers having very little economic knowledge undertook with sincerity. The country achieved high growth rates in manufacturing in Pakistan in its early years, and the country started from an exceptionally low industrial base in 1947. Nevertheless, credit must be given to the planners of that time for facilitating industrial growth with scarce resources. At the time of independence, Pakistan had inherited only 34 industrial units out of 921 industrial units in the subcontinent at that time. And these two were mainly cotton textile, sugar, rice husking, cotton ginning, and flour milling industries. Pakistan has since then come a long way. It has a creditable ordnance factory, diverse and vibrant industries now. We are producing machines, automobiles, home appliances, and we have world-class textile industry. We are also producing fertilizer, chemicals, sugar and cement on local made plant. Just a quick glance at our history. President Ayub's government announced a new industrial policy in 1959. During his formative era, Pakistan witnessed massive industrial growth in the country. This industrial policy emphasized on private sector and development of agro-based industries. During this period, the government gave emphasis on intermediate and capital goods, which included electrical, chemical, and machine tool industries. During 70s, Mr. Bhutto nationalized 34 industries, which reversed the pace of development. And then, in President Zia's time, deregulation and privatization started. So, ladies and gentlemen, in a nutshell, the industry in general remained in flux. However, thanks to arms race started by our arch rival and experience of 3 wars under arms embargoes, we resorted to indigenous production policy for defense needs. POF, HIT, HMC, PSC Kamra, and SPD projects were the outcome of continued support of successive governments under strategic compulsions, and we developed a high-tech, cutting-edge inventory with state-of-the-art indigenous production units despite no substantial support and advancement in civil sector. To discuss technology acquisition options for Pakistan, we are fortunate to have this morning our guest speaker, General Tariq Javed. General had an illustrious career spanning 40 years in Pakistan Army. Commissioned in 1979, General holds a degree in mechanical engineering from UAT, degree in war study from Command and Staff College Quetta, masters in production engineering from UAT, and masters in war studies from NDU. Besides having undergone aircraft maintenance course from Virginia, United States of America. As technical leader and professional engineer, General performed functions of maintenance engineers in the field formation of Armed Forces of Pakistan. He remained actively involved in transfer of technologies of all types of weapon systems during his various command appointments. He has distinction of having worked as Director General Desto for 2 years. He established repair and maintenance regime for strategic weapon systems, and he has dealt with export of military hardware as Director General GIDS, an internationally recognized state-owned organization of Pakistan. The General has a rich experience of running technical organizations and management of industrial infrastructures. Transfer of production and transfer of technologies for localized assimilation and indigenous programs have been hallmark of his career. For his meritorious services, General was awarded Pride of Performance in the field of mechanical engineering in 2004 and Hilal-e-Imtiaz military in 2012. General Tariq sir, most welcome to our today's session, and I request you to enlighten our viewers about your views on the subject.
Thank you, AVM retired Ejaz Malik, for your brief introduction about the subject and a few words about me. Thank you very much for providing me this opportunity and this platform. And I must also thank Badar Expo for giving us this podium today for me to discuss this very basic and but very essential topic for Pakistan. Now, dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. As you know that technology acquisition word doesn't sound Greek to you. You people have been familiar with this word, and at any stage and at any point in time of your life and in your careers, you must have gone through this process, either knowingly or unknowingly. Because the technology, if I say to be precise, it started the day the wheel was invented, and everybody wanted to know that how it is made. So you know the technology is basically a means to accomplish a task, and the resources which are maybe converted into a product or into a process or into a service. What I'm going to talk today over here is a word about technology, that what it stands for and how we have to go about it, and then a word about the acquisition, and then we move on to various understanding of the mechanism as to how we have to go about getting these acquisitions in Pakistan. Now, first of all, as we know that in this era of the rapid pace of development of technologies, the acquisition speed is always lagging for the developing country. Advancement of technology is a key function of developed world, where academic excellence, industrial base, and exceptionally educated diaspora of scientists and engineers are engaged day and night in creativity and exploration of new technologies. Technologies usually stem out of requirements and also through the continuity of existing research processes. The spectrum over which these are spread out is unfathomable. Due to the expanse of application and utilization, and also the nations they plan technological developments in line with their ultimate goals set for attaining a specific vision. Now, you see that we are very keen to gain technologies, and that to the latest technologies. But I will give you a model over here that as a nation or as a country or as an organization, how you can plan or strategize that what technology you have to gain and how you have to handle that technology, because this is very essential. The main and the major or the very important portion of this entire gambit is that first you have to identify the technologies as per the existing and the future requirements of your own entire spectrum in which you have to use them. For example, I'll just give you a basic idea, giving you an example, and this will be an ideal example. This may not be very uh, practical in given environments, in various environments, but still, this can be taken as a model for any organization, for a country, or for any other thing, and then you can modify and implement according to your plan. I'll give you an example based on my experience and expertise in defense sector that, for example, today our armed forces, they decide and they plan a vision, and the vision statement, if I just formulate for you as an example, that we should excel in cyber warfare and be able to defend our entire spectrum of weapon system against any cyber attack by 2030. Let's arbitrarily assume that this is the mission which has been, or the vision which has been selected or adopted by our armed forces. Now, I'm talking with reference to specific to the country because we are saying that what type of strategy we should adopt. Because getting technologies is not an easy thing, and mastering them is yet thing. And then adaptation of these technology is yet another domain. I'll come down to these aspects later. Now, after having given this mission, what we are primarily saying over here is that there would be certain actions which will be required at national level. Now, what are these levels? Because you have to know that technology, once you select or once you commit based on your vision, based on the mission of any organization, or based on the vision of any country, then there is no going back because it will take your time, your effort, your money, and everything which you will put into it, and you cannot reverse this course of action. So, after having, let's say, as this, I gave you an assumption that if this is the mission adopted by the armed forces of a country, or let's say Pakistan, what is going to follow up next? First of all the departments of the armed forces will be asked to reorientate themselves and gradually sensitize downstream all the elements within their framework to know what is the cyber warfare and what precautions or what active measures they have to take in order to avert that type of attacks onto their weapon system. So gradually they will have to align themselves with the vision. So this is the first stage of the operation, which sets their own course of action and their own mission or vision. Now, after that, the second step comes because this is going to be a national effort. This is not going to be the effort only by the armed forces, but this is going to be a national effort. Second thing, which is very important, is that all the academia will hold that look for another future of 10 years or 20 years, we are going to go into this field. So what they have to do is monetarily, they have to add subjects which cover all these areas and all these aspects. And to train the fresh graduates into these streams of education and into these areas, be it nursed or be they be private institutions or whatever. So I'm talking about the national level. Now, what is going to happen is that because if you take these technologies of cyber warfare, then definitely you have to add those subjects which cover amply in the education level or at the postgraduate level. And this will be the actual workforce which is going to absorb these technologies, because the people who are already system may be trained various other areas, and those areas may not be akin to your future vision. So the thing is that we have to bring in the new blood and those people who are equally equipped to take on to these new realm and the technologies. That at the same time, you will have to sensitize the public and the private sector industries, and those industries will be assigned that okay, carry out the BMR, that is the balancing and replacement of your machinery, plant, and equipment in order to meet this vision domestically and make certain softwares or make certain hardwares, and your industry will have to also be aligned towards your vision. This is the vision which you may say that it's a national vision, as we have Pakistan vision of 2025. And in those vision, if you want to become Asian tiger in the economy or economic sector, then you have to see what are the instruments in which organizations you have to introduce those various actions where they can maximize the profit and go into the well-being, and they achieve certain kind of targets, and then they improve in the financial sector and all that. Now, at the same time, after having spoken about the public and the private sector industry, I would also say that government or these organizations which are the public private organizations like the armed forces are the leaders of the vision and they are going to take that vision ahead, then they have to invest in R&D institutions. And these R&D institutions should be funded for the innovation in this field, in the particular field in which the vision is set or the mission is set, and they can give the lead to the public and the private sector industries. Now, whatever I'm talking to you, ladies and gentlemen, this is called a focused approach for achieving or homing on to the technologies. But in any case, that in the developing countries or the organizations, we cannot afford to achieve technology without synergy. This is what normally term as cluttering of technologies. Many areas are there in the international world. The world is progressing. We know that there are emerging technologies. We know that there are so many tempting areas where you want to go. But the thing is that if you have a vision and a mission, then you must focus on to that particular thing and try to restrict to those technologies which you want to for the attainment of your vision. Because technology acquisition is a very, very big ball game. You just cannot imagine that how much you have really sweat out to get these technologies from the international players. Now, once we talk of technologies, the basic driver of a technology is the innovation. And this stems from the excellence of academic diaspora, funding, R&D, facilitation, and strong industrial base and the availability of highest technological expertise. Now, these technological expertise is also based on the innovation performance. Now, innovation performance is basically is the ability to realize the innovation into a successful business model. Now, or a business reality. If you go and search in this technology performance index ratings, then you will find that this is being compiled by the Boston Consulting Group and the National Association of Manufacturers of the United States. And this makes the innovation performance index of a country. And it comprises of many things. That is their educational skills, their infrastructure, their funding towards the R&D, their actually translation of the innovation into the practical realities of producing the services or the products, and And very recently, I just went through that in their eighth edition, 2020. Germany was named the most technologically advanced nation, followed by South Korea and Singapore. Now, you see, these countries have a great edge of uh, education and finances or their financial powers. But the most important thing is the diaspora which they have of the educated people and those people who are really competent and they are innovative and they have the opportunities to be to do those innovations because of many things. They have the facilitation, they have the resources, R&D funding, lavish spending, which we unfortunately in our country we don't have that liberty. Now, after having discussed this basically technology part, now I come on to the second thing is that is the acquisition. Normally we use this word technology acquisition, but this is these are two separate domains as technology or the innovation index something else, and the acquisition is altogether a new ballgame. So selection of appropriate acquisition mode for a required technology is one of the critical and strategic decisions. The primary decision is either to go for R&D or acquire off the shelf. Now, for a developing country like ours, we have very limited options to acquire from high technological expertise countries. And main factors are our strategic alignments, our partnerships, and our access to these countries, limited finances, limited industrial base, as in the introduction already AVM Ajaz gave a very nice resume about the infrastructure of the industry which we had and how it flourished and then how it went down. Therefore, Pakistan is relying basically on R&D and limited acquisition of the technologies to meet void in the R&D and production processes. You see, over here, I would also like to mention few things that while in our experiences during our service, when we were going through various technology transfer packs or something like that, times we would find that they were so exorbitant and they were so expensive that we would not be able to really think about even getting them. So what we did was that we started R&D in various areas, and let me tell you, we Pakistan a very talented and educated manpower, although very limited numbers, but they have produced wonders in this present scenario, and Alhamdulillah, we are capable and we are competitive in all spheres of our battle readiness, and you should be proud that whatever manpower, whatever infrastructure, whatever resources we had, Pakistan stands very tall amongst the community of nations as far as our defense is concerned. So what we would do is that wherever there was a void or a gap, uh, to fill to fulfill that gap, we would go for certain kind of technology acquisition, not the entire. And because if you go for the total of the shelf package, they are very expensive. And in this domain, we did a lot of hard work. Our people did uh, remarkable and tremendous in getting. Although R&D takes time, R&D does take you to certain failures. R&D takes you to a level where you are frustrated, but nevertheless, that is the only course of action. And for the international players in all around the world, if you see that most of the countries, either you take example of Singapore, you take example of Korea, you take example of Germany, and they are totally banking on the manpower. And this manpower, they invested in them, they trained them, and that is the only action because this manpower innovation realizes into the technologies, and that is the ultimate. Now, coming back to this acquisition process, so therefore, as I said, that Pakistan relied mostly on R&D. And this too was in the public sector. And in the private sector, there has been a very, very limited, uh, I mean, participation in the format because the private sector went for the JVs, they went for the franchise agreements, or they got under license certain things. But most of the time, the maximum effort or the funding which the government was towards the public sector, and that was the requirement, and for it was need for the day also. And you shared that where we stay, we adversary, Alhamdulillah, we have matching and befitting response capability to any threat which comes around us. Now, second part of the technology acquisition. Now I discuss technology acquisition as a one package. Now you see, if you acquire a technology and you fulfill your objectives, that is of making a certain product or making a certain process, or providing some service. After that, what? Do you stop there? No. The most important is that out of this technology, you have to show the creative adaptation of this technology. Now, what do I mean by creative adaptation? Is that if the technology is there and you have done your homework for the particular task for which you got this technology, now see that can we fan out from here? Can we utilize this technology into the other sphere of activities of our social sectors or of our government other sectors, or maybe? And if we do that, that is where you are going to earn the revenue, where you are going to earn the, and you can even offset the cost of technology by creative adaptability. Now here I give you two examples. In early time, somewhere in 60s, the what the US did was that they made numerically controlled NC softwares, and they used it for the defense purposes. And at the same time, the Japanese, they acquired it and used it for the manufacture of numerically controlled machine tools. Now, the US part which they created and they developed for their defense, they utilized it and they just shelved it. But once the Japanese got that, they took it into the commercial sector and they made NC machine tools. And it was, I mean, such a great in the 70s and 80s to the Japanese economy. And they just took their technology and then they adapted it for certain other things, and they moved. Similarly, there is an example of this liquid crystals, which were created in somewhere in 1960 by the Americans, and they wanted to replace these cathode ray tubes. Now, these cathode ray tubes were replaced by the liquid crystals at that time, but the Sharp company also took it from them, and then they used it into the LCD, that liquid crystal displays in the calculators, and then they fetched I mean, great market shares for selling those little computers. So you have to really weigh that if you spend into the technology acquisition, then you must open doors for the creative adaptation for that technology and take it downstream and take it anywhere to fetch the revenue. So this is the best part of that. Now, last of the subject, or very important thing is the absorption. Now, this absorption basically of technology absorption refers to the acquisition, development, assimilation, and utilization of technical knowledge gained from another source. The most important factor in any TOT, that is transfer of technology, manpower and infrastructure to absorb the technology. This is the real time impediment if home country receiving the technology is not adequately equipped. This is what I said in my earlier part of the discussion, that when we are going for the acquisition of technology, we must focus that how you are going to absorb it. Do you have the requisite manpower? Do you have the requisite understanding? Do you have the requisite infrastructure? If all that exists, good enough. But when we say that technology acquisition and after acquisition absorption, that absorption is really something which is uh, going to play the game in this entire spectrum of technology acquisition. We have seen many countries in the world who got certain very important technologies, but they could not translate them into reality. So that reality, why it didn't came about? Because of their lack of trained manpower. They never had that brain trust. They never had those trained scientists and engineers who could really translate those documents into realities. So these are the things which are very uh, important, which we should see. Until or unless you have the base to absorb the technology, it's no use of getting that technology. So basically, I'm trying to say is that if you want to excel into certain area, you must start your own R&D, and from your own R&D, you will keep on moving towards those voids which you want to fulfill. That you can get the technology from somewhere, and after that, once you get that technology, absorb it, do wonders with it, and do for the creative adaptability, and go to level where you start generating revenue and you offset the initial cost for which you actually invested. Now, once I say about the cost, to frankly speaking, you just cannot define what is the cost of technology acquisition. You see, you pay basically the price of ignorance, of not knowing a thing. And once you know that, and then you are baffled that it was such a simple thing, and I have paid so much for this. But the thing is that for the first time, I never knew what it was. So we have been paying tremendous and exorbitant cost for the technology transfers to the countries who had this technology. And rightly so, if it is their brain trust and their innovation, and if you do not come up to those standards, then you have to really uh, pay the price. And but to my mind, in a country like Pakistan, we don't have that much liberty of getting technologies from all over the world. You very well know all that what are the strings attached to it and what are the prevailing global situation. And because there are many factors, your political stability in the country, your infrastructure, your financial health, your GDP, your so many things which are attached. And why would somebody come and give you that technology, especially in defense sector? Sorry, no one shares their their battle horses and their brains with you. They will always keep it close to their chest. And so are we doing. And Alhamdulillah, we have done a lot and too much better in these areas. But to my mind, for a country like us, we should focus on R&D. Now, to getting onto the R&D, let me tell you that this is a very I mean sensitive and very, what I should say, not say dismal, or but maybe a very weak. We are in this area because for R&D you have to pay a price, and this price alone any entrepreneur cannot sustain. If you have industry in the country, then definitely industry can chip in for this R&D, and You have seen that international models where the academia and industry they cooperate for such like research and R&Ds. But in most of the cases in our country, the R&D has been done in the public sector, in the government institutions, uh, government universities. Many organizations exist in Pakistan which are funded for by the state, but that funding is very limited, too low. And until unless we invest in that, we produce our manpower and have a diaspora which go to the realm of technology expertise, and they are the one. If you train that manpower, give them the tool, that is the infrastructure, R&D, finances, everything, then they are the people who are going to be innovative, and they will create the technologies, or at least will be your gateway for absorbing the existing technologies which they exist in the world. Now, towards the end, just a couple of recommendations. I would like that, as I've already said, that we have very limited technology partners available in defense sector, and you know the reason. However, we should seek JVs in the defense sector in the field of conventional weapon system. That is to the least that we can start with, and have JVs in the development and manufacture of the conventional weapon system. Now, once I say this JV, globally also this is true, that if you do venture with global giants who are in this field, in these areas, you get two advantages. The first is that we get access to the technology, and secondly, we also get the access to the capital, and third is that also an access to the market, because any investor who is going to have a JV with us would look forward that whatever product they make, they also have a market for that. And many model exists in the world today, that if you just take an example of, I'll give you example of Indonesia. In Indonesia, they had about 20 industries in their public domain and public sectors. And till last year, they had only 4. And rest of them, they all did the JVs with the international players. But you see, all these joint ventures, they come about if you are strategically aligned with those countries, if you have your future concerns with them. There are many other factors which really they dictate that thing. But nevertheless, we should keep on trying for limited JVs in certain areas and then grow. And then the most important thing is the revival of our industry. As Ejaz said, that we had a very wonderful time in 1960s, when at the end of 1960, that a decade of reforms was celebrated, and we had the Pakistan Industrial Development Corporation looking after so many of factories and so many plants, and even we had indigenously, I think we were about to produce these Bedford trucks, and Gandhara Motors was doing very well, and Vela Engineering, Olive Industries, and Pakistan Machine Tool Factory, they were all contributing. But suddenly that nationalization was a disaster, a total failure. And after nationalization, we never came out. Even if at the time of Zia regime, they wanted to give it back, these industries, they just were taken as a piece of land. They could not be resuscitated into the industries. And today, even we feel dearth of that. So if you compare that our that concept of are we agrarian society, or we have to go for agricultural products and build a market around that, which Pakistan has been doing, because almost most of the R&D money has gone into the agriculture sector and the leather sector in Pakistan, and very limited funding into the large scale manufacturing and engineering. So now what we have to really do is that we have to uh, make an environment where the ease of doing business should be there for the industrialists to really invest in Pakistan, and also the foreign investors who could come here. I was just going through the ease of doing index, and now Pakistan stand at 108th position out of 190 countries, and it is very remarkable that in the past 2 years we have moved up 38 points, and this is very creditable for this present regime if they have done certain reforms in these areas, because regulatory mechanism for any financial investor who comes to Pakistan, he has to see that so many taxes, so many regulators, so many things. So I think the government has reduced number of hitches and number of hurdles for those people, and where we have moved up to 108th position. But still, it's not like that, because if you compare Singapore, Singapore is almost top of the list of ease of doing business for any importer and anybody who comes to that place. So, primarily, what I wanted to say today is that getting a technology, absorbing it, and creating new things from it should be our vision and our focus. And second thing, acquisition only cannot do the job. We have to move into the area for R&D and for the betterment of the country and for the future. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I would just ask a couple of questions. First of all, as you have rightly mentioned that collaborations between companies and universities are a critical driver of innovation economy. These relationships have long been a mainstay of corporate research and development, and corporate giants like General Electric, Siemens, Rolls-Royce, IBM have collaborated with universities for decades. In Pakistan, what measures can we take to encourage this interface of academia and industry?
Well, you have rightly said that in those countries there is a lot of academia and industry cooperation, and in our country we have to really, you see, first of all, look towards the revival industry. At present, whatever industry and whatever shape they are also, I think, struggling for their production processes and everything. But nevertheless, I think the Ministry of Science and Technology, along with they have this one of their setup established, and like the NUST has also given an access to the industries. They have opened up their windows in the university, which I saw there in the NUST also, and they have extended some collaboration to the students, and they are giving certain incentives for the students for R&D. But this is limited because there are less number of industries in Pakistan, and they are not really coming forward. But certain measures should be adopted by the government to facilitate them and to give them some respite and some taxation areas whereby they should open up to and colleges. But still, it is existing, but in a very primitive form, and this has not come about the way it is in the West, way it is in the South Asian countries. So I think you have a point here that R&D establishments.
Sir, my next question is that for a sustainable model, What would you recommend for our, as you know, we have our some of our universities, NUST or A University, and many others. Some of their disciplines are internationally recognized in reasonably good rankings. What engineering disciplines would you recommend them for this particular aspect, that which ultimately, bring in that well qualified and skilled workforce as a product of those universities? So which disciplines do you think we still need to introduce in our universities?
Well, I think if you go for the latest, technologies which are in the world, although we have aerospace technologies for space and this subjects, actually not the discipline, but maybe the subjects which we can further add to our existing. I was just reading this certain articles where I was just going through this. What are the new emerging technologies? For example, prediction of genome level, and there are certain universities which are carrying out studies in the genomic, like I think that Institute of Biosciences at the Faisalabad, and then the blockchain technology or many other. You see, the disciplines are the same most likely. For example, mechanical engineering, mechatronics, electronics engineering, electrical, agriculture, all these. But those disciplines of engineering, they have to look forward for the new topics and research areas which are coming about in the world overall. Because ultimately we meet those challenges, because in this area of rapid development of technologies, if you come to this aerospace technology, then for example, for 5G, I learned that almost about in 2025 or 23, there will be 30,000 satellites in the space. Now this because they have to really interact with the man, material, and machine all along, and that will be the virtual reality. So those areas where these technologies are going to flood us in future, I think we should keep an eye on them and add those technologies right into in our syllabi, and bring our new generation in sync with the what is happening around in the world, because otherwise we will be left alone. And I was amazed to just see these new technologies and new these emerging technologies, because if quantum computing is coming, why? Because if they have to carry out the studies about the DNA of the genomes and everything, then they have to handle lots of data. And likewise, I think in the cancer studies also, this quantum computing is playing a lot of role. And wherever there's a mega data handling, it is required. So all these new emerging technologies which are the world is stepping into, and they are moving along. I think this should be our focus, to introduce into our syllabi at various tiers and various levels, and also our universities collaborate with those universities which are dealing with these subjects, and they must think of awarding joint degrees to them, and like we already have joint programs in various sectors, like MBAs. Many UK universities are now affiliated with Pakistan universities, and they are awarding degrees of UK-based universities. So likewise, we have to train our manpower, our masters, our scientists and engineers into these areas, and I think the universities are abreast with these technologies, and they must due cognizance of this. But nevertheless, if any new discipline of engineering is coming about, we must also adapt to that.
Sir, as you have mentioned in the talk, uh, in advanced countries, the cutting edge technologies were initially acquired by the defense industries, and subsequently, they were given, or a part of that technology was transferred into the corporate sector for a wide spectrum applications. In case of Pakistan, we know that we have a success story for the defense related projects. But mostly our R&D, as I understand, in defense related industries, they were product specific. But obviously, after continued hard work, we acquired innovative technologies. But under the current organization structures, do you feel that there is a need to have some interface? Because our normally our defense related industries are discrete. We do not have an integration with the outside civil sectors. So how can we really involve our private sectors to take some lead from the defense industries and absorbs those technology, obviously without compromising the strengths or the specific the discretion of the parent organizations. So how can we transfer? uh, I think this would require some strategy at the national level, where we gradually introduce or a limited access may be given to the private sectors. What are your views on that, sir?
AVM Ejaz, you have really hit the bull, and this has always been my primary focus of doing these things. But presently, as you've rightly pointed out, that the security and the situations and many other factors, we have not been very open, to be very frank, towards the private sector or towards the industry or maybe towards the academia. But I strongly believe that whatever we have acquired can be 100%, or I mean not 100%, maybe 80% of the knowledge, whatever we have, if given down to the public sector, given down into the academia, we can do wonders. And this is one area where we are lacking. And recommendation also to the concerned people sitting in Pakistan, that we open up these technologies for commercial use. Because if we do not do that, then definitely we are just getting the burden the entire onto the public sector. And if, in my opinion, if the private and the public sector are not on the same page and not at the level of productions and everything, then that country is not a success story. If you see in the West, all the defense manufacturers, they are also doing so many commercial products and producing commercial jobs for the country. I can give you an example that once I went to one of the countries to fetch a very high speed motor, and I asked them that I need this motor, but I saw many mopeds, those electrically powered mopeds were parked in front of their company. I asked them, what are you doing? They say, well, this is the motor high speed. We just reduce the speed and put it into the moped, and we are making the mopeds. And likewise, if you go for this Megatron, this tube, which is used in the microwave, we have been using it in various projects. But if you commercialize it and you bring it down to the market and you start manufacturing the microwave ovens, so I fully agree with you, and this is, I think, one area where we are lacking. And we must open up our these defense industries where we do not have any secrecy on those areas and to the public sector. And as a matter of fact, it will pay lots of dividends to this nation also and for our future also. But I am fully on the same page as you are, and I feel that gradually we should think on these lines, because that is also our national asset. The private sector and public sector are national assets. If anything is in the public sector, that should be also available to our private sectors, and we should carry out certain collaboration with them. If we have the technology, they have the base, they can employ more manpower. We can even share the manpower. We can even do anything. Because within the country, if you go for certain commercial projects, it is a win-win situation for the nation as well as for the country and for everyone. Because unfortunately, you see what actually happened here was that after 60s, when we had a debacle of this industries, the only thing which stood was the public sector industry. The private sector, it just vanished. And later on, due to certain other reasons, that because of the security, because of the political instability, because of the regional conflicts, because of something, the capital just flew away from Pakistan. And all those industrialists who were very shy of investment, they also left. So we have to really revive our private industry in this country. And until unless we revive this, we cannot. I don't think there is any future, because public sector industries are meant for specific jobs, and the government pays for that. But how long you will keep on footing the bill if you don't have money to do that? And that money is only going to come about if you have the collaboration in the private sector and your private industry, and you also fan out and do some public private partnerships. Until you do public private partnerships, it's nobody can run. You see, internationally also, let me cite you one last example. If you have Airbus, which is being made by France, their company over there, they don't make everything under one shed. The entire parts are coming from all over the world. So globally, everybody is participating into that economic industry. Likewise, the public sector in Pakistan cannot do alone this for years and years. It's high time that the public sector has to marry up with the private sector and show their cards to them and ask them, these are the fields. If you have some options, let's go for some joint venture. Let's go for this public private partnerships. So I fully agree with you, and this is one of my very core to my heart, that uh, I wish this coming very soon.
Sir, my last question uh, pertains to the the success story of Singapore model, wherein they retrieved their highly skilled human resource from abroad, gave them incentive and put them into a channel to contribute for the domestic industrial growth. So what what are your views that what is the possibility to retrieve our human resource who are very well placed and working efficiently, like USA or other advanced countries. So how can we incentivize them for coming back and contribute with their knowledge and qualifications?
Uh, as I also mentioned in one of my during my discussion, that in ease of doing business, Singapore is number one on that index. Now, what they did is that they created an environment in their country where I think recently there was some study also that out of 100 the technology industries, the best technology industries of the world, 80 have their concerns available in Singapore. Now, first, these concerns they came for towards the innovative manpower which the Singapore has, because they wanted to absorb this manpower into the future for innovation and in their technology. And now the manpower which we have abroad, or our diaspora, which is of highly qualified engineers, scientists, and of different fields, they are available. In order to bring them to Pakistan, we need to have some kind of infrastructure where they can be absorbed. Now, this infrastructure alone in the public sector is not sufficient. Private sector, definitely. The incentive to these people, which can be given by the government of Pakistan, and as well as the opportunities in the private sector, they can marry up, and we can devise certain mechanism of bringing them. But the basic point is that we must have the infrastructure. Infrastructure is the existence of those world renowned companies who have their offices, who have their businesses in a particular country. Only then this manpower can be really absorbed. If we bring them here and we don't have anything where they can be absorbed, it will again be a disaster. And for these people, we need to have an industrial base in this country and infrastructure for R&D, where these people can come and then they can work freely in an environment where they can be more innovative and take this country forward. But prior to that, we have to give them an infrastructure and a base. And for this, I think the government is doing certain good things, that the business and the industry revived. Electricity tariffs have gone down, or things like that. And if we absorb and if we get certain industries in Pakistan of certain giants who may come for JVs or something like that, in those areas can be absorbed. Otherwise, you see, giving incentive only in the institutions or in the universities, it is already saturated. We need the scientists and engineers in the field of industry to grow, where they should come for production, for upgradation of processes, for value addition into our processes, and for value addition into our services. So there are many fields where these people can come, but I feel my point of view is that we must have some base first, and then they can be invited.
Sir, can we have some incubation centers in our public sector units that you are you have been associated with?
As I'm really speaking, that this will again come from some top policy formulation in the country. I mean, we have to really give out a global policy at the top level to facilitate these type of activities of creating some incubation centers, some creating the interaction points with our civilian diaspora. Because if you remember the SAPDEC, there was a seminar by the name of SAPDEC. Then there was a seminar in GHQ also, that public-private partnership. And but the thing is that whatever we are doing is not being translated into what we are expecting. And this translation has to be from the top, and they have to take certain bold decisions, and they have to lower these certain shields around those areas which are of common uses. The technology is basically is not only for one purpose. We have the technologies which are for common uses for many other things. So we have to really first take a decision at the strategic level, that what should we do. And I fully agree with you that these incubation centers, or these interactive places where these can go, and even in the universities also, we can establish certain hubs we can transfer certain technologies to them, and then they can train to their students and their R&D PhD doctors and everything. I fully agree with you that it should be done.
Thank you very much, sir. It was really a pleasure having you with us, and obviously, your talk has given us a very, in-depth knowledge about the technology acquisition options and strategies for Pakistan.
Majaz, thank you for providing me this platform and this forum for expressing my views on this very important subject. And I also thank my viewers for their patience and listening. Anyway, if they have any further queries and questions, I'm always available through the same channel, and they will give you certain information as how you can contact me. And I wish you best of luck pursuits and wherever you are doing. But remember one thing: whatever we do with a focus for the betterment of this country and for the glory of our nation. And thank you very much, and Allah Hafiz.